Salutations, my name is M. Now listeners, before we begin our journey today, be advised that this podcast is intended for 18 plus or mature listeners. Now, we begin our journey into the mind of M. With my first episode, I will be covering the Titans Project, the system I designed for level 200 character builds for each of the main classes as a series of NPCs or PCs for the Tales of the Titans campaign module. Now, this is for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, so if you came for stories of adventures or what I'm writing next for my novel, The Adventures of the Ascended, that will be on next month's episode. However, if you will indulge me for a moment, I will tell you the origins of this particular project. The highest level most campaigns ever go is 20. There are some that go higher, but typically people stop at a flat 20. Which inevitably brings me to my contribution to the world of D&D. As when I first started to design characters that I wanted to play, I designed them at level 20 because I wanted to see how this character how far this character could go. I wanted to see what this character could do, as well as I wanted to figure out the riddle posed by Tomb Annihilation, which is how to beat the unbeatable maze, effectively. When something about the monk caught my eye, because it's the only class that really requires 3 stats to be at 20 instead of the usual 2. Those being Wisdom for Utility and Spell DC, Dexterity for Attack, and Constitution for hit points or health points. Because I found that the highest I could get those stats was 20, 20, and 18. And the weirdest part about it was it bugged me, and I couldn't tell why it bugged me so much. It got to a point where I had to pick one, Dexterity or Wisdom. Both add to your armor class due to a monk feature which prevents your hit points from going down. I tried Standard Point Array, Point Buy, and of course rolling dice was the worst of all due to it being pure chance, which in my mind is just another word for chaos. So naturally I asked myself, how do I get those 2 extra points? I could use a magic item, but that would have to be okayed by the DM, which in my mind was an unacceptable uncertainty to my scientific-based thought process. But if I could get to level 24, then I could get the 2 points I desired. This meant I would need another class to get the other 4 levels I sought. My first thought was to multi-class into Fighter, because it gives us extra attack with Action Surge. We can heal ourselves for Second Wind. That would be nice, especially as the resident tank and source of damage. But I still was not satisfied with the answer. So I went straight to the extreme and said, why not multi-class into the same class, thus gaining 2 subclasses, the 2 subclasses we need, and that seemed to satisfy me. Unfortunately, it left me with one insane but burning question. What's stopping us from doing it multiple times and using that to create a level 100 or even a level 200 character? And to this day I can't really think of a good enough reason to not create this system. Thus, the Titan system was created, and my reputation for being a mad scientist increased. Now, to the more technical aspect of this episode. Health or hit points are calculated by the maximum number that you can get plus your constitution modifier. For instance, a barbarian has a d12, so he gets 12 plus his constitution modifier per level, giving him the maximum amount of hit points possible, which can be considered metagaming or removing the fun of rolling your dice, leading it to being OP or too easily abused. And to that I say, the whole point of the Titan system is to create characters worthy of godhoods or being called paragons. So in other words, they're supposed to be OP. Armor is calculated as normal, but do check the stat sheets for the custom items I gave them, because each Titan has at least one armor-based attuned item or armor effect. Combat functions similar to what you'd be used to in standard D&D play, except that at level 200, each Titan gets 10 actions and 1 bonus action, which means classes like the Fighter will get 40 actions, 60 with Action Surge, and Ranger, Barbarian, Monk will get 40 respectively. Damage can be either calculated by either the maximum amount automatically, or by rolling a single die and timesing it by the appropriate number. So, for example, a 9th level Fireball has 14d8, so if you roll a 4, it would be 4 times 14 to equal 56 damage. My advice is bring a calculator or 3, especially if you're planning to do the full run. Now, the full run is all 12 of the classes starting at level 1 and going all the way to level 200. After that, I'd probably call it a day. I wouldn't even attempt this without having a group that I absolutely trusted and I knew that would gather reliably on a weekly basis. The question of when they would become immortal, because by level 20, several classes have immortality or extended youth, like the monk and the druid, and my thoughts on that is, if they complete a huge mission like killing a rogue god, or they simply reach level 100, I would give them all immortality as an endless youth and limited appearance control. In other words, they would just control how old they look and if they made their scars visible or not, and they can choose depending on their character. I will be using the campaign modular books to invent a level 1 to 200 campaign, and some homebrew stuff such as custom items and battles. The current order of these books is Dragon Heist, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, Dungeon of the Mad Mage, Acquisitions Incorporated, Curse of Strahd, Out of the Abyss, Baldur's Gate Descended into Avernus, Horde of the Dragon Queen, Rise of Tiamat, Storm King's Thunder, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, Tal'Dorei the Companion Guide, where they get their famous airship apocalypse, by the way, Explorer's Guide to Warbound, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, Odyssey of Theros, Eberron Rising from the Last War, and then Tomb Annihilation spread kind of throughout the levels. Feel free to give me any tips, tricks, or comments on this order, or anything else you hear or learn during this episode, or any other project or episode on this podcast. I would love to hear your thoughts. In terms of the abilities, I would check the builds I have already posted on Archive Our Own by M the Writer, and you will find that whenever there is an ability that doesn't stack, you gain a feat or a previously unavailable subclass ability. I will be looking into using the alternative class features that we have from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I already have a basic blueprint for the Ranger options, so look out for that update. My best advice is just to do them in the order I showed you guys in the builds, as they are listed on the website, but feel free to contact me if you have any trouble. In terms of the abilities that do stack, I have an excellent example from the Monk's Flurry of Blows. Every time you use it, you get an extra 10 attacks for the same key point at level 181. So every time you complete 20 levels, so level 21, 41, 61, etc., you gain an extra attack on Flurry of Blows. On the subject on natural ones being an automatic failure, I think after level 50 or 60, depending, that shouldn't be the case, because you should have a 15 plus proficiency, and in terms of the lore, you should be experienced enough not to automatically fail anymore. And that's just how I roll. Feel free to change that if you decide to use the system yourself. That one's kind of one of the optional ones. Another thing that was brought to my attention was the monsters, because even the Tarrasque with 676 HP and 25 armor class can easily die to the Titans fighter using the full 61 attacks and the lightning draw feature. With a 60 plus to attack and damage, gives you a total of 300 and 600 base damage in a single turn, easily killing the Tarrasque, which has plagued gaming tables for years. Now, because of this problem, I came up with two solutions. Giving them the maximum amount of health suggested in the monster stat sheet, or a base math formula I made, which is the difficulty rating times by the base health should help enough, but that's only experimental. I desperately need playtesting on pretty much everything to do with this system, so feel free to do so and let me know what you think of it. In terms of the class Blood Hunter and the subclasses created by Matthew Mercer from Critical Role, they will be in the Titan system and will be featured heavily in the Tales of the Titans story. I won't be making the Blood Hunter and the Artificer builds or putting them in the story until the following conditions are met. 1. They have 5 subclasses each. 2. I finished the main 12 classes up to level 200. 3. I have to see how many subclasses the Artificer will get to see if she can join the Titans in their adventures, just because it's hard to write when you don't know if and when these subclasses will come out, or if they will come out at all. And I already have my hands full already, so you will have to forgive me. In terms of new builds being released, I'm hesitant to make more until I get my copy of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. However, I will be releasing the Paladin build soon, and I will talk about today some eventual abilities that will be pretty interesting. For one, there is this subclass creation for the Bard, which can create a dancing item that will have a minimum of 1013 hit points and will be able to create 10 or 20 of these items, which even with a armor class of 16 and dealing with a maximum of 650 damage per turn is still an incredibly dangerous threat. A Rager subclass called the Drake Warden, which gives you the ability to summon a Drake with 1,005 hit points, and a breath attack with a save DC of 79 minimum. Meaning between the Drake Warden, the Swarm Keeper, and the Beastmaster, combined with the Bestial Bow, one of my custom items, you will have a small army of creatures aiding you, along with any other beast or monstrous companions you get along your way to level 200. Because the Bestial Bow's main ability allows you to ignore the limit on Drake Warden, giving you 5 Drakes instead of 1. The Way of Mercy Monk will become incredibly powerful in the Titan system because it only needs 5 key points to bring someone back to life. And this build gives her 200 key points. Not to mention Quivering Palm with a DC of 79 minimum, base speed of 335 feet, and for the cost of 21 key points, you can get 231 attacks with Touch of the Long Death and Quivering Palm boosting it. It makes the monk an instant killing blow for a total of 34 key points with 23,100 D10 plus if you use the extra 12D12. Extra 12D10 for a base damage of 462 and 240 base damage. And before you ask, yes, I am aware I am going to the deepest pits of hell for my creation. Unfortunately, on that delightful note, that is all I have for you listeners for this month's episode. But until next time, salutations. The music today was Medieval Loop 1 by Alexander Nekadra at www.serpentsoundstudios.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license.